he didn't believe that stuff. So for people who don't believe it, when they see it, it's way more of a miracle. So here we have this veil, which is so important. And you know what? As you know, there's a scripture that says, that Jesus says in Revelation, I think it's the 3rd chapter, where he says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Anyone who opens it, I'll come in and have supper with them." Well, and there's a famous painting where there's no doorknob on Jesus' side, but there's a doorknob on the side of the person, because it's us that has to open the door. And you know what I thought about? Because Jesus is also the veil. He's the intercessor. He's the bread of life. He's the light of the world. You know, he's the one who's the perfect cleanser, and he's the one who sacrificed his life for us. He represents the blood. He only used a veil, and we use a door. Isn't that just the way we are? Because we've got that door up to protect ourselves, and really, we're very lonely behind that door. And all we got to do is open it, and there'll be a whole life, an abundant life there for us. Even Christians who say they have accepted Christ still are not fully living. They're not fully alive in the sense of the fact that if we accept Christ, we say, "Oh, yay, I'm going to go to heaven." Well, if that's the world, and I come in from there, and now I say, "Well, I have a relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm going to live forever, and I'm going to go to heaven." And if that door represents the end of my life and where I'm going to heaven, many of us just stand right here by the door and never move. But this is the kingdom of heaven on earth. And we not only have a job, but we will really live a more abundant life because of that knowledge, because it's given to us. So now, the only one that could get in here was Aaron. He was the high priest. And this is the Ark of the Covenant, which is the 3rd Ark. I'm going to turn it around so you all can see it a little better. And as young Kurt and I were talking, this top part is called the mercy seat. And maybe you've heard that expression before. It says, "Go to the mercy seat." And that is what Christ is all about, is mercy. And these two little guys here, we broke one of their wings, were the two seraphim, and they have described them in different ways. They would have had a face, those of you who know anything about English heraldry, like a griffin, what they call a griffin, where the face would have been like a lion. And then they had wings, and they had the bodies of men, which is also in Ezekiel. And your pastor is going to do a good series on the wheel within a wheel next time we get to that. That'll be the scholarly class when we get to that. Anyway, inside here there were actually 3 things, and there was a piece of the tablets, of Moses' tablets. There was Aaron's rod, which budded, and some manna. And in many ways, it was in there, and it was kept as a remembrance. Again, we said that the Hebrew God has got a remembrance. He wants us to remember. He wants us to remember the law, but what he wants us to remember is that Jesus is the mercy seat and covers the law, and makes us able to fulfill it. Because when that high priest came in there, they had put blood on his horns. And when he came here, and he had to bring the blood with him in order not to, and the other thing's kind of cool, they used to put a little anklet on him, and then a long chain, and they kept the chain connected out here because they didn't know if he actually literally saw God, that he might not be struck dead. So he wanted to be able to pull him out. Because in the flesh, which sounds funny, but I probably asked him for several chains. But anyway, they knew that if he actually saw the presence of God, then he would die. In the natural, we would, because it would be too strong. But here this man came in with this blood, and what I think about for us is that this blood was shed for us. A lot of people say, well, it's so brutal, why did they have to have all those sacrifices, and why did he have to do that? Couldn't they just tell us a good way to live, or something like that? But you know what? Principle doesn't cut it when you've got real problems. You've got to have something visceral that you can remember that applies to you as a human, because you are flesh and blood. And yes, we are spirit. And yes, this is the Holy of Holies. This is our spirit. This represents where we are. And you know what? There's so many Christians spend all their time in the outer court. They're doing all this stuff down here, and they never get in here. And they get in there, and there's a whole bunch of them never in there. They say, well, I'm doing this for God. Well, you never spend any time with God. Because this is a place for one person. This is just you. And at the beginning of this, I said, Each person is alone. At the end of the day, no matter how well you know your wife, no matter how well she knows you, no matter how much you love them, at the end of the day, there's nobody that knows you like he does, because it's just you. And you're either there all alone. And you know what we live in a humanistic society. Everybody says, oh, man's going to invent this, and he's going to take care of that, and it's going to be okay. At the end of the day, they're miserable. That's why we're into New Age pantheism now, because we were born to worship. You never saw a dog out there lighting a candle in the woods, did you? But we all running around worshiping something. Even atheists worship something. So what happens is when you cut God off, eventually you realize you haven't got it. We're like onions. Everything you have is something that came from an experience. You keep peeling that away. At the end of the day, there's nothing in the middle. There's nothing left. And as an artist, I can tell you that's why they cut off their ears and blew their brains out and did all kinds of things. So they're always searching and searching. There was nothing there. Man cannot answer those questions. So the reason it was visceral, the reason it was like that, is so that we would never forget. Because if I say, if you've got a little baby in here and that baby's crying and crying, we used this example the other day, and that baby's crying, and I come and say, well, let me explain to you, little baby, the principle of motherhood. Motherhood is about kindness, and motherhood is about this. That baby's going to keep screaming. Just like Hugh's baby, right? Kept screaming. Well, that baby doesn't want the principle of motherhood. That baby wants a mother. Yeah. And when Jesus Christ came here, he gave his life for us in a way that we could understand. He came down and became flesh. And it's not like any other religion. There's no other religion like that, where he finally said, look, the way that I'm going to relate to them is come down, get my hands dirty, and I'm going to become one of them. And then they're going to understand. But you know what? Only 1/3 of us is ultimately going to understand. Most people are going to reject that message. But when that blood was brought in there, and God received that as atonement for it, that blood is our righteousness. I always like to think of it as the little red beanies. So that when God looks down and he sees, like in the Passover, he sees the Passover lamb and he sees that, he goes, oh, look, there's my son. He's the one that lives next to her and he's so kind. And he's the one that helps that lady over there. And he's this one. He's got kindness. He's got love. He's got joy. He's seeing the joy and the love and the righteousness of Christ. But he's not looking underneath to pick on you. He only has love for you. And that's really why he did all this elaborate stuff. So that by the time that Jesus Christ came, there were many that said, that's it. That's what we've been doing this for over and over and over again. Is because this is the truth and the truth is here. And John the Baptist saw it right away. So the purpose of the tabernacle really is to show you how much that you're loved and that this is a real thing. This is for real. And we have so many voices, but we have no true depth. We have a lot of intelligence, a lot of knowledge. But at the end of the day, we're lonely. And even the sheep are lonely, and many of them are starved because they haven't received the true abundant life. And that's what this is really for, is for you to think about it, to spend more time in the Word, and to realize that this is more than just a philosophy. It is not a principle. It's not a group of principles. And at the end of days, for sure, the principles are not going to work out like